Hello. I'm HoJo.
And I'm Hunnsy.
And welcome to this, the 29th episode of HoJo and Hunssy's Hard Rock House, the safe space for old Gumbies just like us, where I am in the middle of a very metal monsoon where I'm recording today, Hunnsy. Who would have thought?
You're in Portugal, as we mentioned in last week's pod. You have moved south to record, haven't you?
I was heading south like the birds fly south for the winter, thinking that I'd arrive here and I'd be in a pair of budgie smugglers and a little tight T-shirt. No, didn't work out that way. We arrived here and over the last 2 days, it's been absolutely torrential rain.
Is it cold, though, or is it still quite warm?
No, it's not cold, but my gosh, has it poured down. It's literally not stopped for 2 days. You know, you get those apps on your phone. And as you're driving down and you're looking at what the weather's going to be like when you get there and you're all excited and then you're looking and you go, 100% chance of rain. And they were announcing 56 millimetres in 1 day. And by gosh, it came yesterday, let me tell you. It got even worse, to be fair, because on the way down, a little bit of gravel got flicked up, you know, when you're on the motorway and you suddenly hear that sound on your windscreen, that clink. And you go, oh, God, here we go. And, of course, shattered windscreen. Not shattered so that you couldn't see anything, but a fissure the size of a 50p piece or something like that. So I spent yesterday in torrential monsoon weather trying to drive round near where I am in Portugal, seeing if anyone would fix a broken windscreen. So it's really started well for me.
Yeah, it's going well. It can only get better, can't it?
Things can only get better. That's not a metal song, that.
No, it's not. Hopefully the sun will shine and you will get out in the aforementioned budgie smugglers.
Last year, when we were here, there's a boardwalk near to where we stay where you can go and promenade along the beach. It's lovely. One day we were there. Have you seen these things when you're abroad at seaside resorts? They often have bits of workout equipment that are permanent on the beach.
Yeah.
You can use it and it's like an elliptical and things like that.
Yeah, the picture you're painting, I'm immediately going to Y&T Summertime Girls video.
Okay. It is kind of that vibe. The lovely Louise and I were walking along and there was a man on the elliptical and he was in his 70s. And you know when you see those people who've lived all their life under a hot sun and they look like walnut, don't they?
Bit leathery. Yeah.
And this fellow was there and he was going for it on the elliptical bike and he was very, very keen that everybody saw him. And he was wearing the smallest pair of budgie smugglers that you've ever seen. And so we took a discreet photograph of him and then we sent it to the lovely Louise's sister, just laughing about it. And we went, what do you think of this? And her response to it, which I thought was brilliant, was just 2 words. It just went, so confident.
I guess you've got to be confident to pull that off, haven't you?
You really do, don't you? But I loved so confident as a comment.
When the weather does turn for the better, maybe you could go back to the aforementioned boardwalk and maybe have a go on the elliptical thing yourself, because I know you're a keen gym person, and maybe lovely Louise could take a photograph of you on the elliptical with a pair of small little budgie smugglers on, and we'll share
I'll tell you what I am going to do. I'm going to dig out the photo of Budgie Smuggler Man and we can put it on the social media channels just so people can see how confident he is.
And see how confident they would feel if they did it. Would they do it? I don't know.
Well, that's a challenge we could lay down to the single-digit listeners, isn't it? We could ask them to send us photographs of themselves on a beach in budgie smugglers.
We're going into dangerous territory there, I think. Mind saying that? Social media is all about free speech now. You can do whatever.
It's all about free speech. You can say whatever the fuck you want.
You can do what the fuck you want. So
scary times, eh?
Scary times, but let's not get into that.
Let's keep the mood joyous. Let's not talk about monsoon weather.
No, I don't know whether I'm going to keep it joyous after what I've been listening to.
Oh, really? I was thinking it might be Steel Panther or something like that.
Well, that would be appropriate, wouldn't it?
So, okay, is it a bit doom and gloom? You're going to bring the mood even further down, Hunnsy?
Yeah.
What have you been listening to this week that makes me want to slip my wrist?
It's an album that's close to my heart. I've got some hilarious stories about this band, but this album is close to me for lots of reasons. I've been listening to the second album by Northeast black metalers, Venom. Black metal.
Venom. I like Venom. I can't say I'm a massive fan of the music, but every time you speak to those guys, every time I've interviewed them, they're just hilarious.
Brilliant. This album, Black Metal, came out in 1982. And there's been a million podcasts and a million interviews with various members of thrash metal bands about the importance of this record and how it defined a genre, it started genres and all that sort of stuff. It was, at the time, what the fuck is this? And I remember,
groundbreaking.
At the time, I was wearing black and white stripy Pete Way tribute trousers and leg warmers and David Coverdale white boots.
Neckerchief around the knee.
Into Whitesnake and UFO and Iron Maiden. And
we all were.
Yeah, exactly. There was me and my mate Pete. We were double dating these two girls at the time. We were a 4-piece.
Not a power trio. That would be all wrong, wouldn't it?
We were a solid 4-piece. We were just good mates, really. We were only like 13, 14. I remember one time we were around either my girlfriend or Pete's girlfriend's house, and we were just hanging out and listening to stuff and blah, blah. Showing off me Pete Way trousers. And this fella comes in with a carrier bag with Volume Records written on it, which was the local Newcastle record shop. Very excited. I would say frothing at the gills about an album.
Excellent news.
That he bought. And it was Venom's Black Metal. He was going, oh, these are fucking brilliant. They're going to be massive. I went, oh, okay, put it on then. I was immediately drawn to the front cover. I thought, this isn't going to sound like Journey.
And it was very satanic looking, wasn't it? There's always a goat's head on those things.
Yeah, very striking front cover. And like, you know.
Yeah, spiky name. That became part of the thrash thing, didn't it? That bands had to have ever more spiky and illegible logos.
Oh, yeah. Looks like a pile of branches that are just on top of each other.
Yeah.
And he put it on, and first track, Black Metal. It's like, what on earth is this? And you're thinking, bloody hell, this is really extreme. Who are these guys? No, they're from Newcastle, blah, 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 blah.
Did you like it the minute you heard it?
Like's not the word. I was attracted to it. The closest thing I'd heard at that point was a load of ropey old punk stuff that came out after the back of the Sex Pistols, like, you know, like the Exploited and Discharge and all that sort of stuff. That
GBH.
Like, all that more extreme punk stuff. That mixed with the more traditional stuff that we knew at the time was Motorhead. And you go, this is taking it to another level. And obviously the satanic thing, there's always been bits of Satan across metal music for years, going right back to Zeppelin. And
bits of Satan, like an autopsy.
His leg, or his little tail, or his horns, or whatever. But just the song titles, Buried Alive, Sacrifice, and Don't Burn the Witch, and Countess Bathory, and At War with Satan, the preview, blah, blah, blah. And you're thinking, wow, these guys are taking Satan to the masses.
Did you think it was serious?
As a 13, 14-year-old, I probably did.
These people really are into it, and they're sacrificing goats and virgins on a regular basis.
So there was a bit of noise about Venom in the Northeast. The album never got played in any of the rock clubs, but a lot of people started talking about it. I remember the year after, went to see Kiss at Newcastle City Hall, lick it up to and it was sold out. I only managed to get a ticket for the balcony. I remember there was a load of kerfuffle on the balcony, and I looked over the opposite side of the balcony, and there was these 3 blokes causing a bit of
mayhem.
Bit of mayhem. They weren't fighting, but people were disturbed by their movements. And I looked over, not a massive venue, Newcastle City Hall, so you could see over the other side. And there's this bloke lounged across 3 or 4 people's seats, kicked out the way, with these like 24-hole Doc Marten boots on. This long, centre-parted, ready, Albany type, this bright red leather jacket on. There's another 2 pillocks. One's in sunglasses and the other one's got wristbands on and studs. And I remember some bloke behind me just went, I think that's those wankers from Venom.
Did you get to know them? You did, didn't you?
Yeah, I got to know Tony, the drummer, really, really well.
How did you get to know him?
Once Venom had it wasn't dying a death, but
it had its moment.
Kronos had left, come back in. Jeff had left and come back in, and blah, blah, blah. And Tony had got somebody else. And Tony and Eric was the manager of the band. He had a recording studio in Newcastle. And one of my mates' bands were recording in there. Just went down, got to know them. Tony used to drink in the same pubs in Newcastle, and I got to know him through that. We ended up playing in a football team together.
What position did he play?
He played centre forward.
Glory hunter.
Yeah, he was decent, actually. He used to scare a lot of the opposition defences. Now, I don't know whether that was just because of his frame.
Was he quite a big guy?
Yeah, or whether they knew he was the drummer in Venom. Probably not that. It was probably because he was quite a big guy. And
put himself about a bit. What position were you playing, Hunnsy?
At that point, I was playing right back. I used to do a lot of searching balls over the top, in behind. He was one of those strikers who played on the shoulder.
He had a little bit of pace.
He had fuck all pace. I actually ended up designing 3 or 4 Venom album covers.
Did you?
Yeah.
Obviously not the well-known ones.
No, I did Temples of Ice. And I did The Wastelands. We also did In Memoriam. It was best of. Rather typically, it's got a picture of a graveyard on the front, right?
Yeah, really. You do surprise me.
But it was a best of, so we had to collect loads of memorabilia. We had to get loads of memorabilia from the band, old gig posters. So we put all this memorabilia together, did a double album. I wasn't actually there because the guy who I was designing it with, Eddie, I think he went along, where we were doing the front cover. I think it was Tony, he had this idea of doing the photograph in a graveyard. But he says, obviously, we'll have to break in. They won't let us in to do it. We're not going to ask for permission. And I think they actually broke into the graveyard and the police were called and they had to leg it quickly. So they managed to get a shot. And then they got the photograph, did the front cover, and then someone went, hang on a minute. You can clearly see the name of the person on the gravestone.
Yeah, you can't have that.
We're going to have to somehow get that out. So we had to get someone to Photoshop it out and all that. This is in the early days, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, well, it wasn't easy to do that kind of thing.
Exactly. I left Newcastle years ago, but I still keep in touch with Tony.
He's a lovely man, isn't he? Because you've helped me out occasionally when I've wanted to do interviews with Venom for Rock Candy or what have you.
Yeah.
You put me in touch with Tony. In fact, I talked to him not very long ago about the making of black metal, the very album that you've been listening to. And he had some great stories.
I didn't know when they were making this record.
No, my favourite story. If you want to read the whole thing, go and buy Rock Candy magazine and keep me and Hunnsy in a job. Very good advice, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's out February, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. February. Yeah. So go down and get that because it's full of lovely, gorgeous metal articles.
Are we doing a plug for Rock Candy magazine?
I think we are. Nothing wrong with that. Keeps us in gainful employment, Hunnsy.
It does. Yeah, so go on, tell us the stories.
My absolute favourite was one that I think got cut from the powers that be.
At the magazine.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you anyway.
Right.
Told us this story. There was a poster that was given away with black metal. I don't know if it was just the first.
Yeah, there was.
10,000 copies or whatever. And it was a really cheap looking thing. Do you remember? 3 black and white photos of the 3 members of the band: Abaddon, Tony Bray; Kronos, Conrad Lant; and Mantas, Jeffrey Dunn. Jeff was on a motorbike that he'd borrowed off a mate. He was really into KK Downing, apparently.
Well, look at the hair.
So he wanted to have the Judas Priest style motorbike, and he had some girls draped over it or whatever it was.
Not really a Satanist.
No, very much doubt it. I don't think any of them are they really?
No, they're not. That's a different story.
Yeah. Tony, was he with a dog or something? I can't remember. Anyway, the picture of Conrad, I think he was holding a dog on a chain, a vicious dog, but standing next to him was a totally naked woman. Do you remember this?
Yes, not vividly, vaguely. Was she totally naked?
She was totally naked. I checked, believe you me. In the interest of making sure that all information relayed on this podcast is authentic, I checked.
Right.
And she was totally naked.
Totally naked, okay.
She might have been wearing shoes. I don't think you saw the bottom of her feet. But I can vouch for the rest of it.
All right. Okay.
So anyway, I was saying to Tony, who was the girl on this photograph? And he went, oh, well, it was a girl who used to be a friend of someone, not anyone's girlfriend in the band, someone who used to just knock around at Neat Records. And I'm thinking, okay, right, yeah. But the best part of this was he said, anyway, a good few years later, like you said, him and Venom's manager, Eric Cook, were real good pals, weren't they? Yeah. And he said, we had this, like an agency, a management agency that they started.
They managed a few bands and they also have a studio there.
So he says to me, this is a good few years after black metal, he says, I'm in there with Eric.
This is probably around about when I knew him.
He said a magazine was sent from Germany to our office and it had a reproduction of that black metal poster in the middle of it. Germany's a much more liberal country than us. You know, you can have a naked woman in the centrefold of a music magazine, no problem at all. Don't wait for that in Rock Candy magazine. Never happening. Someone had sent it through to show the band that this poster had been used, and him and Eric were looking at it, going, oh, great, that's nice, blah, blah, blah. Left it on the desk. And then somebody came to pick up a package. You remember in the days when bikes were huge?
Couriers.
Couriers. And it doesn't really exist anymore because most stuff gets pinged down lines, by PDFs and this and that. They had a package that needed to be either delivered or picked up. The fella turns up, the motorbike courier. He goes, oh, what do you guys do here then? He'd never been here before. And said, oh, well, we're in music and we manage bands and blah, blah, blah. He went, oh, yeah. Anyone I might have heard of? Tony goes, we look after Venom. That's probably the biggest. He goes, oh, yeah. I remember a bit of Venom from back in the day. And then he looked down and he said, there's a poster of us in this magazine. Tony said, it's just come in. And the fella looked at it and he looked at the picture of Conrad and the naked woman and went, that's my fucking wife.
His current wife.
Yeah, his current wife. Didn't look like he knew that she'd been the poster girl on Venom's black metal.
Brilliant. Going back to the album, if you are so in way inclined to love black metal, extreme metal, death metal, thrash, then you will know the role that Venom and particularly black metal plays. There's endless quotes from various bands. Phil Anselmo, I'm just reading a quote. I first bought the album for the cover alone, but the music and the words got to me. There's
no doubt that is a seminal album. But when you listen to it now, more than 40 years later,
Yeah.
Do you listen to it and go, oh, that's a cracking album? Or do you listen to it and go, oh, that's an important record, but it hasn't stood the test of time?
So yesterday I was on the school run, picked my daughter up.
Did you play it when she was in the car?
No.
Oh.
I was waiting for it to come out of school and I was listening to it. It sounds different to when I first heard it because it's coming through a decent system, and nostalgia definitely played its part when I was listening to it. I was going, oh God, I remember this, I remember that. Yeah. There's actually some decent songs in there.
Is it as extreme as you remember it, or is the fact that everything that has come after it made it pale a little bit in terms of how out there it was?
I think lyrically it is still extreme. Things on the extreme ladder have gone above and beyond that now, but lyrically it's still very, very extreme, very dark.
Do you find it funny now? The more extreme the metal is, the funnier I find it, because I can never take it seriously.
Well, the one thing you've got to realise is that we talk about extreme now and it's all like,
yeah,
what's he talking about? But at least on this record, it's not as extreme where you can't hear what Kronos is singing. Right?
Now we sound like very old people.
It's true though, isn't it? You just assume that all those pillocks who run around forests in Scandinavia, right?
Yeah, I always just thought it was a tremendous hoot, but obviously then you had all the satanic killings and all that, and you went, oh, there's some people out there taking this stuff seriously.
Exactly. Do I think it stood up to the test of time? Probably not. Probably recorded in 1981, came out in 1982, and it was recorded at Impulse in Wallsend, Newcastle. I've been there. Not the best studio in the world, but you've got to give them a bit of leeway. But if a band was going to go, right, we're going to come out and we're going to change the landscape and we're going to do something that's going to get us noticed, they certainly did it.
And they certainly gave birth to an incredibly important new evolution of rock music. So you can't take that away from them, can you? Tony said to me, he's not bothered about the fact he never made any money. But what he is bothered about the fact is that their contribution hasn't been recognised by the Metal Hall of Fame. And I think he's right.
Yeah, I think he's right.
Venom should be recognised in the Metal Hall of Fame as influential in the evolution of music.
Definitely.
So black metal from Venom, if you want to know more about it, go and buy the latest issue of Rock Candy magazine where there's a tremendous interview with Abaddon and you'll learn all about the making of that seminal record.
What have you been listening to?
An album that came out just a year after Venom's black metal, and it didn't change the face of rock, much as I wish it had.
Right, okay.
But funnily enough, there is a connection between Venom's black metal and this album that I've been listening to, in that both of these bands have been cited on many, many occasions as primary influences on Metallica. So who will that be?
Raven.
Nope.
Are they British?
Yes.
Diamond Head.
You've got it.
Have you been listening to Canterbury?
Yeah, there you go. Because many episodes ago, you had been listening to Diamond Head's Lightnings to the Nations, the first album.
Yeah.
I have been listening to their third album, Canterbury.
What a record.
Now, what do you think about Canterbury, Hunnsy?
I adore that record.
Do you? Oh, okay, that's really interesting because I think it's very much a record that divides opinion, isn't it?
Oh, completely divides opinion.
Let's set the scene for the single-digit listener in case he doesn't know. Lightning for the Nations came out in 1980 on an independent label in the UK, and it was reviewed in Sounds magazine by Jeff Barton, saying it contained more riffs than the first 4 Led Zeppelin albums combined. Which was a great thing to make you pay attention. Absolute bollocks, obviously. But a good comment. And it certainly made me pay attention to Diamond. And then they signed to MCA. They brought out, what was it called, In the Heat of the Night, was it? Borrowed Time. Sorry, yeah.
Which is fucking brilliant record.
Yeah, you love that record as well?
Oh, I love that record.
They were coming out with really heavy riffs and some songs that were quite fast. And you can see very easily where Metallica were taking influence from when you start to hear what Metallica got up to in 83. But there was internal friction within the realms of Diamond Head. Colin Kimberley, who was the bass player, and Duncan Scott, who was the drummer, got ousted. And it meant that the only 2 original members in Diamond Head were vocalist Sean Harris and guitarist Brian Tatler. And when Scott and Kimberley got their marching orders, that was when the band had started working on their third album, which was their second one for MCA. And that's what became Canterbury. But as you'll know, Canterbury was a complete abandonment of everything that had come before, wasn't it? It didn't sound like the same band anymore.
No, it was almost like they'd gone, okay, so everybody out there who thinks that we're part of Nawabum and we only write heavy metal songs.
Yeah, and we're a bit Black Sabbath meets Led Zeppelin. They were touted as a band most likely to. And I actually thought that they had the tools because Sean Harris was in my opinion, by far the best singer to emerge from the new wave of British heavy metal. By far.
I would concur with
He has an incredible voice. Rich, powerful, melodic, capable of being sensitive, capable of being raw. Really, really great singer, Sean Harris.
He displays that in full form on Borrowed Time.
But when the third album came along, I was invited to go to the studio where they'd started recording down in London to do an article for Kerrang! And live in the studio, this is what's going on, what's the new record going to be like, etc., etc. And by this time, here's another 6 degrees of separation. Do you remember who they'd brought in on bass?
Goldsworthy, wasn't it?
Correct. Merv Goldsworthy from the Missing in Action FM was brought in on bass. So I went to the studio. Tatler was there, Harris was there, Merv was there, and they played me a couple of songs. I think they played Canterbury and Night of the Swords.
Oh, Night of the Swords is a great
song. I listened to those records because cards on the table, I was kind of a bit late to the thrash party. Like black metal, Venom, Raven, all that stuff wasn't really my thing. Too punk influence, too raw, not enough class to it, in my opinion. I really liked Diamond Head because they were not really part of that. But I was still really surprised when I got to the studio to see that they'd kind of abandoned all of that Sabbath Zeppelin vibe and had come up with something that I thought was really unique sounding. Sounded like a rock band, but it didn't sound like any of those things that had come before. It's really hard to describe what Canterbury sounds like, isn't it?
The first track I heard off that album was Making Music. It's got that down, down, down. You kind of go, okay, this is interesting. It felt like they weren't following the formula of Borrowed Time.
I thought it was really original sounding. There were lots of clean guitars that Tatler was using all of a sudden that were blended in with the bigger riffs. Harris was doing even more. It's not pop music in any way, is it? But it's very melodic. And the way the melodies are constructed don't sound like anything out of the new wave of British heavy metal. It's about, making music. Yeah,
it's
really kind of
it was
almost like soul. No, that's not.
Well, no, I think making music, that wouldn't jar if Def Leppard had done that.
Yes, I could understand that, but I like the fact that Diamond Head's approach wasn't that multi-layered, multi-harmony, Mutt Lange radio rock thing. It feels more organic to me. Sorry, Joe, much as I love you. I really like the way that Diamond Head had gone about producing that record too. It's so hard to describe what the music is, I think. It's one of the most original hard rock records I think there's ever been made.
I wouldn't disagree with you. God.
If you think of a song like Ishmael, with all those Eastern influences and like chanted vocals,
and obviously the last track, Canterbury, that beautiful piano.
Oh, wow! The whole album is really stunning. And of course, what do you expect? The album came out and it completely misjudged the mood of the moment because everybody had gone, what we want is extreme, fast riffs, really, really heavy. Metallica had suddenly stolen that ground and everybody was excited about them. Canterbury comes out, everyone goes, what the fuck's this? You don't ever hear Metallica playing anything off Canterbury, do you? What you've got to remember though, Hunnsy, is in the chronology of it, the first Metallica album only comes out the same year as Canterbury. I don't think there's that much of a groundswell of interest in Metallica at this stage. Only if you're a tape trader and you really know what's going on in rock music do you go, oh, there's this thing starting to happen. I don't think there's a correlation between Metallica exploding and Diamond Head either trying to do the same thing or not trying to do the same thing. Thrash is very much in its infancy here. When I was in the studio with him, I got the impression very much, particularly talking to Sean Harris, that he was just bored of it, bored of that music.
Yeah.
He just wasn't that excited by a song that had more riffs than the first 4 Led Zeppelin albums. I really got the feeling he was going, it's not really my bag. I'm moving on. I want to do something that's more creative, that is more challenging, whatever you want to call it. And Canterbury was the result of that. And as I say, it absolutely stiffed.
Yeah.
Nobody was interested. I remember there was also issues. Do you remember about the fact that obviously this is in the days of vinyl and MCA put the original pressings of it out and apparently it jumped all over the place with your needle. So obviously that pissed people off and I think that didn't help. So much is about timing in music, isn't it? And Metallica's timing was spot on and Diamond Head's was just completely off because they went widescreen and softer when everyone was going more focused and harder.
My favourite track on that album is To the Devil Is Due. What a
brilliant.
It's just this 6 minutes of epic, builds really slowly. It's got a brilliant chorus. I think it's got strings on it.
The album's not full of power chords and fast and speedy riffing, is it? That's not what it's about at all.
No, Out of Phase.
Yeah, but even Out of Phase is very kind of poppy, isn't it?
That's a pop song.
I'm out of phase and I'll always be. And lovely little melodies. Nothing to do with thrash metal.
No, I still listen to it.
So do I. And I have to say, I don't really listen to Borrowed Time that much.
I listen to Borrowed Time. I have several bands where I have moments and go back and revisit. I'll go and listen to them solidly for a couple of days or a couple of dog walks. Diamond Head are one of those bands where I just go, right, I'm going to have a diamond dog walk. A Diamond Head dog walk.
Diamond Head dog walk. I'm going to put you on the spot then. Yes. You have to choose your favourite Diamond Head record. Can only have one.
I'd probably pick Borrowed Time just over Canterbury.
Not for me, mate.
You'd pick Canterbury. Okay.
Oh, Canterbury all the way.
Okay.
I still think that is a really amazingly interesting, clever, varied, different rock record. Frankly, fuck you, public, if you didn't like it.
I think Borrowed Time is a interesting rock record. The signs were there on Borrowed Time, really, weren't they?
Did you think so? Because Borrowed Time is still, in my mind, in the wheelhouse of your classic rock band. Whereas Canterbury just throws out the blueprint completely. Not that it's not a good record. It's a good record. I'm not arguing that point. I'm saying it's much more in what you'd call a traditional wheelhouse than Canterbury was.
Yeah, I agree with you.
It's a perfectly valid thing to say that's your favourite of the three, but you're wrong because it's Canterbury. Anyway, we're doing a public service here, aren't we, by bringing 1983's Canterbury album by Diamond Head to the single-digit listener's attention. If you are a broad-minded fan of rock music, I would bet a serious amount of wonga that you are going to love that record. And if you don't, something wrong with you.
I would heartily recommend it. Absolutely great choice.
And do you think that'll persuade Merv Goldsworthy to come on the pod to talk about his contribution?
No,
not a chance.
Not a chance. He'd probably want to talk about FM's Indiscreet album.
He won't want to talk about anything because he doesn't want to come on. Disgraceful. Anyway, Hunnsy, we must move swiftly along to a more sad story, really, isn't it? That a couple of weeks back, John Sykes sadly died, didn't he?
He did. That was a real shock. Came completely out of the blue.
Kept it very quiet that he had cancer, didn't he?
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about that.
No, neither did I. 65.
When I was a kid, 65 seemed like fair enough, reasonable innings. No one's going to say you died tragically young, are they? But now,
yeah, no.
Not long left for the HoJo. Only 5 years.
John Sykes, you can't deny the mark he's made.
He polarised opinion, though, didn't he, John?
I think he did. There's a few people thought that he wasn't good for Whitesnake, he wasn't good for Thin Lizzy and all this. But bands move on. What you got to remember is there's no denying how good he was on guitar. And
he was an amazing guitar player. I think people also thought he was a bit cocky, frankly.
There's nothing wrong with that, is there?
I think that's part of being a rock star, isn't it?
Exactly.
And he was the quintessential 80s guitar god, wasn't he? He had the blonde hair, he was chiselled, he could peel the riffs off like there was no tomorrow. He looked like he belonged on stage. Let's put it this way. He wasn't out charismaed by Phil Lynott, and that's saying something, isn't it?
Or David Coverdale.
Yeah, because there's an awful lot of people who would very much be out charismaed by those guys.
Definitely.
And he wasn't. He stood his own.
Yeah,
Funny enough, I interviewed him 2018. I looked it up this morning. I did it for Burn magazine in Japan. He gave me some interesting quotes. I thought maybe as a tribute to John, I'll play a couple of them for you here.
I think that would be lovely.
Okay, so let's do that. We're going to play a couple of quotes from John from my 2018 interview with him. And maybe one of these days, a big idea for us is to re-release some of these original interview tapes. What do you think, Hunnsy?
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
A little teaser for people just for now. Here's a couple of quotes from John Sykes. So this is John talking about his contribution to Whitesnake's 1987 album, the classic that went on to sell oodles in America and for which he was unceremoniously told his services were not required before the album actually came out, despite the fact that he'd played on it. So this is John explaining his view on the outcome of that recording and how things turned out for him in the end.
Well, I knew the record was really good. Actually, the record, when I heard the final mixes, it wasn't, and I'm not trying to say anything bad about Keith or anything, but having worked with Mike Stone on it and knowing all the parts, there was a lot of parts missing off the record.
Really?
When it was mixed, because they didn't really have the vision and know where all the stuff was supposed to go together.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of parts missing. So the album really never ended up becoming what it really originally was, because there was, like I say, there was parts missing and there was things in there that wasn't supposed to be there, and they'd used parts and things, because there was obviously all these tracks and things that I had spent a lot of time putting together.
Yeah.
We knew how the guitars were supposed to go and this and that, so they had sort of their vision of what it was, and I'm sure Keith was listening to all this stuff and thinking, wow, fuck, what am I going to pick here? So Keith was going through it and did the best he could with it, but the album actually, if it would have been, I do feel if it would have been mixed by Mike and it would have been finished through to the end with Mike, would have been even a better album, honestly. There's a lot of things missing, but then, I know where you're going with it. It wasn't. So when I first heard it, I was sort of shocked that it didn't sound the way I expected it to.
Right.
As far as all the parts and bits and pieces and everything. I mean, the album still ended up being a good album, and it still had a lot of success, and. But it wasn't what it could have been, but it was still a great album,
Was it hard for you to kind of sit there and watch it going, and you'd see not only other people playing your songs, but then other guys standing there with gold discs for basically a record that you'd written and you'd made?
No, none of them played a note on the thing.
Yeah.
It was just ridiculous. Well, I got my platinum and gold discs as well, but it was still sort of, because quite honestly, I threw myself into working on my Blue Murder first album at that point. I really couldn't give it the time of day, because it was painful, of course, and it wasn't anything that I wanted to really look out, see, and of course there wasn't really any getting away, because the fucking shit was being played everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was bittersweet, because it was obviously selling a lot, and there was a lot of money to be had down the line from it, as far as the songwriting.
Yeah, so at least you got your just desserts financially.
Well, I mean, I had to go. It took me. I had to get legal to get that.
Oh, really?
I was being sort of held up too, so it took me. I had to sort of go after that later, because there wasn't none of that coming in either. After he was sort of
Jesus.
He wasn't sort of. It was just. It was a fucking nightmare, actually.
So what do you think of those then, Hunnsy?
Well, there's a lot of sadness that obviously.
There's a lot of sadness being able to hear somebody's voice who's no longer with us, isn't there?
Yeah, but there's also something quite marvellous about it as well. He wasn't a nobody. He's got music to leave behind. He's got some brilliant songs that he's written.
You know what was funny? When he left Whitesnake and came back with that band Blue Murder that he did with Carmine Appice on drums, I interviewed him for a Kerrang cover story. I was given a number that I had to phone in LA, because obviously he decamped to LA very early in his career. He was always going to be there, wasn't he? He was an LA person. I got the number and I was told to phone at a certain time, whatever it was. So at 9:00 at night, I dial the number and the phone answers and I go, hello. And I go, oh, hello, is that you, John? And he went, yeah, it's John. I went, well, it doesn't sound like John Sykes. And I was going, I recognise this voice. And he went, hello, HoJo. It's John Oz. And John Oz was a guy who was my first flatmate when I first moved to London in 1982. When I was 17 years old. And I shared a flat with this guy, John Oz, who was a hilarious bloke. And he was very good to me when I was a kid. And he somehow was mates with Sykes and had ended up out in LA kind of hanging out with John Sykes. And just for a laugh, he'd obviously said, oh, I'm being interviewed by HoJo. And John Oz had gone, oh, he was my flatmate. And so he made him answer the phone. So I was like, what the fuck are you doing there?
Fantastic.
I have a very warm feeling towards John Sykes from that. So God rest his soul, eh?
Sad loss.
It's probably time for us to wrap it up. And I'm going to go away and play Canterbury, followed by maybe a Tigers of Pantang song that John Sykes played. And what about that? Did he play on Love Potion No. 9?
Yes. He wasn't in the band when they recorded that record, The Cage, but...
He was gone by then.
But he played on 2 tracks that were on the album, of which one of them was Love Potion No. 9. I would go back and listen to anything from Crazy Nights or Spellbound, those 2 Tigers of Pantang albums.
Spellbound was a good record, actually, wasn't it?
Spellbound was a pretty good record. Gangland opening track, really good. Hellbound's really good.
As a tribute to John Sykes, we're both going to go away. We're going to play our favourite John Sykes track. Tip the hat to an outstanding guitar player.
Yes, and a sad loss. God rest his soul.
All right, matey. Hopefully the storms will have subsided here in Portugal by next week. I don't know if you've been able to hear them while we've been recording, but the wind is whipping up a frenzy.
Well, we're just getting excited about you whipping on your budgie smugglers and getting down to the elliptical machine and sending us a photograph of you working out.
So confident. So confident. I'll speak to you anon.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Ta-da. Bye-bye.